Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Couric, and this is Next Question. My guest today, Bernie Sanders, is 84 years old, has spent 34 years in Congress, and he can still pack a rally with people a quarter of his age. We've talked many times over the years, and today he even throws a few questions my way. But this moment feels especially urgent for him, and he argues for America. Bernie's long warned that our politics are being captured by the wealthy few. From Trump's inauguration stage in January to his tax cuts for the ultra-rich, that warning seems legitimate. His Fighting Oligarchy tour with AOC and other young progressives has become a movement, and his new book, Fight Oligarchy, doubles down on that message. But is that message too far to the left? Well, he certainly doesn't think so. We talk about the billionaire class, the cost of living, the demonization of immigrants, and of course, the government shutdown, not to mention the current state of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders thinks a movement is afoot, but how will this movement grow, and how will it change the way America fundamentally works? Here's our conversation. Senator Sanders, great to see you again. Thank you for spending some time with us. At the start of this year, I know you launched your Fighting Oligarchy tour, and you were amazed by the passionate, enormous turnout that you were getting in so many places. What does that tell you, or what have you learned from that response about the way Americans are feeling right now about the state of our country?
Well, Katie, a couple of things. One of the observations that we made, and we keep pretty good tabs on these things, is that the people who are coming out, and we ended up speaking to over 300,000 people in 21 states, were not just, Bernie supporters. Many of them were independents, and many of them were Republicans. And what really astounded me about the tours, I'm not running for anything. I'm not running for president. I'm not running for the Senate. And we go to places like LA and 36,000 people come out, and Denver, 34,000 people come out. We go to a Republican district in California, Folsom. Remember Folsom, Johnny Cash's?
Oh, yeah, of course, the Folsom County Jail, right?
Exactly. They have a jail there. I had never been to Folsom, heard of Folsom. Other than that, 30,000 people come out. In Idaho, we had 12,000 people out. Salt Lake City, 20,000 people out. Huge turnouts for a non-political campaign. And to answer your question, what it tells me is that for a variety of reasons, people are really dissatisfied about the status quo. And they're very dissatisfied about the direction in which Trump is taking this country. But by the way, it is more than just Trump. I mean, people are looking around them and they're saying, I'm working really hard. And yet my real wages have not gone up because I can't afford housing. Housing is expensive. Can't afford to go to the grocery store, buy decent food for my kids. Cost of health care is off the charts. Can't afford childcare. We'd like to have more kids, but who the hell can afford childcare? Can't afford to send my kids to college. And people, this is the key point, I think, Katie. We are living today in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. You know that? You think most people see that, feel that? They don't. And they don't because the reality is that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, almost all of the new wealth and income is going to the people on top. And that is what this book is about. That's what the tour is about. It's the reality that in America today, you got one guy, Elon Musk, owning more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. The top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 93% of Americans. And while the very rich become much, much richer, you got 60% of our people struggling with living paycheck to paycheck.
In fact, Senator, your book called Fight Oligarchy, which I have right here, you have said that a lot of pundits and politicians have argued that the term oligarchy isn't something that ordinary people understand, but you disagree with that assessment. Why?
Oh, they understand it very well. I mean, the media may not appreciate it. My friends in Congress may not appreciate it. But I don't care what your politics are. You're a conservative Republican, you're a progressive, you're a socialist, whatever you may be. You understand that the working class of this country is going nowhere in a hurry, while the wealthiest people have more, not just economic power, Katie, they have political power as well. So you go out, and I'm sure, again, I don't care what people's politics are. You tell me, do you think democracy is about one guy, Mr. Musk, the wealthiest guy in the world, spending $270 million to elect Donald Trump president? But it's not just Republicans. You have billionaires in the Democratic Party who spend huge amounts of money to elect candidates they want. That is not democracy. That is oligarchy. That's enormous power in the hands of the few. So I think what people perceive when I write about it in the book is we got to get rid of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which allows billionaires to fund super PACs to elect their candidates.
Treats them as regular individual citizens, right?
Right.
And companies and corporations as citizens.
Right. But bottom line, does anybody really think that it's appropriate that billionaires can contribute unlimited amounts of money to a super PAC who then can elect the candidates they want or defeat the candidates they don't want? No one thinks that that's democracy. So you got today, and what this book is about is the reality that we have a corrupt campaign finance system controlled by billionaires. We have a rigged economy where the rich get much richer. And by the way, Katie, I worry very much about what artificial intelligence and robotics is going to do to working families throughout this country. And that is the reality. It's a reality we don't talk about in Congress very much. We don't talk about it in the media very much, but it's something that has to be discussed.
Well, let me ask you about 2 points you raised, if I could, Senator. I mean, given the current state of the Supreme Court and the people who are sitting on the Supreme Court, how likely is it that Citizens United would ever be overturned in the near future?
Well, that's a very good question, and I worry very much about the what's going on in the Supreme Court and who their members are and where their allegiances are. But this is what I do believe, Katie, and I think history backs me up. As important as the Supreme Court is, and it is important, as important as Congress is, and it is important, the White House, very important. At the end of the day, what history has always told us is that real change, I'm talking about real change, always takes place from the grassroots level. It's when people get mobilized from the bottom on up and not from the top on down. And we have seen that, by the way. It's something as Americans we should be very proud of. You can remember, as I can, let's just say 50 or 60 years ago, do you think women would have been hosting media shows in America? Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Would there have been women? No, it was all men, correct?
Yes.
Would we have states where the 2 United States senators are both women, where women governors are all over this country? Right? No, it would have been unheard of, correct?
Correct.
But what happened? What happened is that, women, for decades, many, many decades, going way back when, said, you know what? We want to serve in the military. We want to be carpenters. We want to run for president. We want to be governors. We want to be senators. And people mobilized at the grassroots level. And we had in a sense, a revolution in women's rights in this country, which, by the way, I worry, about the counterattack against abortion rights and so forth. But no question.
And of course, we have the civil rights movement, and now the Supreme Court is revisiting the Voting Rights Act and may significantly erode that, correct?
Correct. But my point is, in terms of the civil rights movement, when I was a kid, and you had in the South, African Americans could not drink at a bloody water fountain. Kids could not go to a school. Massive segregation. And that changed, not just because of great people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others, because of a grass movement, people willing to get arrested, stand up and fight for justice. Right now, in Trump's right-wing administration, you have a gay guy to be Secretary of Treasury in a gay marriage. Could you have ever dreamed that we'd have a gay guy who's Secretary of the Treasury, or formerly, gay people running for office, governors. All of those positive changes, struggles against bigotry, whether it's sexism or racism or homophobia, they were won not by the top on down, not by a Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court reflected what happened at the grassroots level. And that's the same for workers' rights. In the 30s, workers were working 60, 70 hours a week. They had no rights. They stood up. They formed trade unions, which, among other things, gave us the 40-hour work week and et cetera. So what I am saying, what was true in the past and what we've got to develop right now is a strong grassroots political movement, and I see it happening, where people are saying a very simple point. Look, you disagree with me, that's fine. But at the end of the day, we want an economy, we want a government that works for all people, not just Elon Musk and the other billionaires. That's kind of what this book is about, and it's what I'm fighting for.
Well, I want to ask you about sort of the organizing principle of a resistance movement, a grassroots movement that you're seeing when you've traveled around the country with people coming out all across the U.S. I think there's a lot of unhappiness, but how does a movement like that actually have real impact, right? There's a lot of people who are upset on social media. We've got the No Kings rally that's happening tomorrow all over the country. And yet, with the power structure currently in place, right, with the Republican-controlled Congress and the president, the Supreme Court the way it is, how does a movement like this, under the circumstances, gain real traction?
Good. Well, it's something that I and others are really working on, because I think you've asked a very important question. So I'll tell you some of what we are doing. When we did these Fight Oligarchy rallies around the country, we just didn't parachute in and do a nice rally and leave and say, have a nice day. We often left behind us organizers. And in our rallies, we intentionally focused, with some exceptions, but intentionally focused on congressional districts which had Republican representatives who had won in fairly close elections. So we left organizers there to mobilize people to put pressure on their elected officials and to demand to know why, for example, just one example, their elected officials would vote for a big, beautiful bill, Trump's legislation, which threw 15 million low-income and working-class Americans off of the health care they have because of devastating cuts to Medicaid, and raised premiums, double, triple premiums, healthcare premiums, for over 20 million more Americans. So we put pressure, with some success, on those legislative districts. We are right now, Katie, as we speak, working with thousands of people, often young people, helping them to run for school board or city council or state legislature or whatever it might be at the local level. We are working and supporting candidates who are running for U.S. Senate, governor, U.S. House of Representatives. And I will tell you that in the last number of years, I know people know the name Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but she's great, but she is not alone. You got dozens of strong progressive members in the House of Representatives today who are standing up, fighting for working class families, fighting for justice. So we are having success. We want to build on that.
Senator Sanders, I'm curious how you feel about recent polling that showed that Americans view the Democrats as just as extreme as Republicans. So are you worried that moving further to the left will alienate the voters you need? This is sort of the age-old discussion, right, in the Democratic Party. Should you be more centrist and attract independent voters? If you become too left, will you alienate those independent and centrist voters? And I'm sure, this is not a new concept for you. And I'm curious, how you view that and if it's something that you think about and worry about, because it all comes down to getting the votes and winning, right?
Yep. All right. I'm going to ask you a question. All right. Are you
Okay.
ready?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to interview you. All right. When we talk about moving left, all right. So what are we talking about? All right. If I were to say to you, Katie Couric, I believe that healthcare is a human right and that every man, woman, and child in this country should have healthcare, and that the function of our healthcare system should not be to make insurance companies and drug companies incredibly rich, but to run a effective, cost-effective healthcare system for all. Does that sound
You're
like a
gonna
radical
say
idea, Katie?
you're gonna say, do you agree with that? And yes, I
All
agree
right,
with
are
that.
you ready? Here you go. You're the
Okay.
average voter. Is that too far left for you?
No.
All right. Nor is it for the American people. You know, and I think most of the viewers know, that we are the only major country on earth. It's the richest country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. I live in Burlington, Vermont. We want everybody to come up to Vermont and visit us. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. Now, is their healthcare system perfect? No, they got problems. But Katie, you have a serious surgery. You end up in a hospital in Canada for a month. Do you know what your bill is when you come out of that hospital?
0.
Zero. And by the way, do you know how much they spend per person compared to what we spend? I'll give you the answer. It's
I don't
half.
know the answer to that.
It's half. So we're spending twice as much as they do. We got 85 million people uninsured or underinsured. We got healthcare costs that are soaring, and we remain the only major country on earth not to guarantee healthcare to all people. So, all right, so you ask me, all right, am I going to take the Democratic Party to the left by saying that every American should have healthcare as a right, and we should take on the greed of the insurance companies, and drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world? So you don't think that that's too left, right? Am I correct?
You're
All right,
correct.
how's your next question?
Oh,
Are you
God.
ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, average American. There she is, representing 340 million Americans right in front of you. All right, here comes the question. We live in a competitive global economy. Everybody denies that. 70 years ago in our great country, if you wanted to go to a very good college, say in New York City, Brooklyn College, City College, you want to go to a great state university in California and in other states around the country, do you know how much it cost you to go to those colleges and universities?
In what year?
That took about 70 years ago, in the 50s or something.
Oh, $2,000 a year?
It depends. No, my brother, who is 7 years older than I am, we lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. And Brooklyn College, which was and is a very fine college, back when my brother went to college, it was tuition free. Okay? We didn't have any money, and my family didn't have to pay a nickel. He lived at home. We lived at about a couple of miles away, so it took him a half hour to get to college. I'm sure he was not crazy about living at home, but that's it. He got a very good college education for free. That was true in many states, true in Vermont at that time, California at that time. I don't have to tell you how much college education costs today, right?
Right.
So, Katie, if I say to the American people, here's a really left-wing, revolutionary, communistic idea that we should go back to where we were, roughly speaking, 70 years ago, and make our public colleges and universities tuition-free. Katie Couric, radical idea, too far left for the American people?
I don't think it's too far left, but I think probably the devil's in the details. How do you actually do that, right?
Well, I don't think it's that complicated, frankly. All right. And I think, again, and by the way, it's
I
not just higher education. By the way, there's bipartisan support for the understanding that in Vermont, my state, and all over this country, we don't have enough skilled craft workers. We don't have enough plumbers, electricians, sheet metal workers. We brought billions of dollars into Vermont under Biden to improve our infrastructure. We don't even have the workers to do the work that we need to do. That's true all over America. So it's not just higher education, getting a college degree, as important as that is. It is. You want to become an electrician. You want to become a plumber. So opportunities for men and women to earn very good salaries if we have the vocational schools needed to provide that training. All right. So that's another radical idea. All right.
Okay, wait. I get your point, Bernie. I get your point. I don't wanna use up all our interview time,
Okay.
you asking me questions. So I'd like to address you with this question. I hear you about some of these ideas not being that radical at all. Having said that, looking back at the last couple of elections, it was not, forgive me, a Bernie Sanders aligned candidate that beat Republicans in the House or Senate in swing states or swing districts. The candidates who won are overwhelmingly more moderate, as you know. So I guess my question to you, what evidence do you have that your approach will actually beat Republican candidates in tough territories?
Well, I have the evidence that in many respects, I'm not quite in agreement with your analysis.
Okay,
And I will
tell me
tell you
why.
that all over the country, we're seeing uh, strong progressives. Adelita Grijalva in Arizona just won a landslide victory, running as a strong progressive just last month. And we eagerly await the Speaker of the House to allow her to take her position. But she won a very strong victory. Maybe most importantly, right now, as you and I speak, there are going to be elections in a couple of weeks. And I think the election the American people are most focused on is in New York City. And in New York City, you have the essence of an establishment candidate in Andrew Cuomo, as you know, former governor. Andrew is the establishment, running against Zohran Mamdani, who is somebody who shares my political views. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in 2 weeks, but the polling seems to suggest that Mamdani is in pretty good shape, that he's putting together the kind of coalition that you need to win Black, white, Latino, Asians, that he has right now. And this is, Katie, when you talk about Bernie Sanders politics, this is what we're talking about. He has some 80,000 volunteers, as we speak, knocking on doors in New York City. That's unbelievable. And to my mind, that is the kind of politics that wins election. And right now, as you may or may not notice, when you're looking at Senate candidates around the country, more and more of them are saying, you know what, I think it's time to take on the oligarchy, stand up for the working class, and many of them themselves, whether it is in Michigan, Maine, Nebraska, Texas, elsewhere, are working class candidates who are prepared to stand up to big money. So I think the movement is frankly in our direction.
Yeah, so you think change is afoot, because I was just going to mention there were 4 Senate Democratic candidates who won in Trump states. As you know, Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, Jackie Rosen in Nevada, Ruben Gallego in Arizona, and all of them were more moderate Democratic candidates. They moved to the middle in these elections. Gallego on immigration was to the right of his party. Baldwin ran an ad agreeing with Trump on trade. So I guess, are you saying, Bernie, if I can call you Bernie, that you think that that things have changed considerably since those elections were held?
Katie, what I'm saying, it's not only, and I do think things have changed. It's once again, when we talk about moderate or moving to the left, you mentioned Tammy Baldwin talking about trade. Well, you know what? You're looking at a guy who voted against the NAFTA trade agreement with Mexico, and who voted against permanent normal trade relations with China. So I don't know, moving to the left is those trade agreements were a disaster for working class families, cost us thousands and thousands of factories and millions of good paying jobs. Is that left or right? You can tell me, but our trade policy has been a disaster. But again, it gets back, be careful, I think, about using left or right. It's what are the issues that you're campaigning on? Now, if a candidate, and let me give another example. I don't have to tell you or the American people what has gone on in Gaza for the last year or so. We are looking at a situation where the United States put over $22 billion into Netanyahu's right-wing extremist government. And the result has been the killing of 65,000 people out of 2.2 million, and the wounding, injuring of 160,000 people, 10% of the population of Gaza. By the way, mostly women, children, and the elderly have been killed or wounded with American aid. Now, a year ago, Katie, everyone was saying, well, you got to defend Netanyahu, you got to defend what the Israeli military is doing. That has radically changed. And if you notice today, many candidates were running, I don't care whether they are moderate candidates, progressive, conservative, they're saying, we're not going to support more money going to Netanyahu, and we're not going to take money from AIPAC. So again, left, right, I don't know what it is, but there's certainly been a change of opinion on that issue.
Let me ask you about that because, as you know, I mean, first of all, I guess before I even dig deeper into the mayoral race here in New York City, do you really think that New York City is the best example for the rest of the country? In other words, where goes New York City, there goes the rest of the country. I think a lot of people might say, what are you, high? I mean, New York City is a very unique place, full of very unique citizens, very liberal, very diverse, a melting pot. I mean, that's why I love New York City, where I am right now, because people from all over the world and all over the country come here. But a lot of people would say, I'm sorry, New York City is not where we're at politically.
Okay, good question. New York City is not necessarily the rest of the country. But I would respond to you in two ways. I have been to the rest of the country, okay? I've been to Boise, Idaho. I've been to Salt Lake City, Utah. That's not New York City type communities. I have been to maybe one of the most Republican districts in the entire country, and that is Mingo County, West Virginia. Do you know where that is?
No, I've never been to Mingo County, West Virginia.
It's a beautiful, it's an historical part of America. That county of 18,000 people voted for Donald Trump to the tune of 74%, okay? Pretty Trumpish, right?
And what did they say?
And by the way, the first thing is, we didn't have 20,000 people coming out, but we had 400 people coming out. And it was one of the greatest meetings, and we videoed it. People should go to YouTube or someplace, you'll find it. It was a great meeting. I love the people there. It's an all working class community, and they're struggling. And, as people are struggling all over America, West Virginia has its own economic problems. And you hear people, it was a town meeting. So people get up and say, oh, this is what's going on. Oh, I need to go to a specialist. I got to go 2 hours because we don't have any specialists here. I can't afford health care. Young lady gets up there and, talks about, her dream to get decent quality education, which is where West Virginia is not particularly strong, et cetera, et cetera. Here's my point, Katie. West Virginia is not New York City. LA is not Idaho. All true. But at the end of the day, every American needs quality health care. At the end of the day, every parent wants decent child care and education for their kids. At the end of the day, all parents want to be able to afford to give their kids decent quality food, not junk food. At the end of the day, all older workers want to have the understanding that they can retire with dignity and not have to deplete their life savings to get into some nursing home which may not be of high quality. What is my point? New York City is not Idaho. Yes, you're right. There are differences of opinion on many issues. But there is much more commonality of interests in this country than media and members of Congress perceive. And that's why, one of the joys of my life hasn't been able to go to literally every state in America and speak to zillions of people and really sit down with people. Big rallies, but sometimes we sit down and talk to 15 people. And at the end of the day, all of our people, conservatives, progressives, independents, they want a decent standard of living for their kids, for their parents, and for themselves. and they're not getting it today.
You know, in your book, Bernie, you talk about how 1% of the population has more wealth than the bottom 93% of the population. And certainly income inequality is a horrible and divisive issue in this country, and I think responsible for a lot of our problems. Having said that, how do you put guardrails on businesses without vilifying them? Because we need businesses to succeed in this country. Everyone benefits when a company is successful. You know, communities benefit, employees benefit. So I guess my question is, how do you find the right balance to reduce income inequality, but not damage businesses so much that they can't function in a way that is helpful to society?
Good. I mean, that's I think a legitimate concern. And I wish I could tell you, Katie, that I have a 4-point program that would solve and answer your question with great clarity. I don't. But this is what I do believe. I do believe that we have got to deal with what I perceive as the kind of uncontrolled greed that now exists at the very highest echelons of the business community. And, you know, I know sometimes I got criticized for this, and I don't think it's quite fair. I'm not here attacking, God, in Vermont, you know, all of the businesses, virtually all of them are small businesses. You got mom and pop working really hard, you know, and they have 5 employees, and, you know, they're doing a great job what they're doing. That's true all over this country. But what we do have to deal with, Katie, is that you got people on top who really honestly believe that they have the right to do anything they want economically and politically. And they are very religious people, and their religion, though, is greed, is more and more and more. And we have to deal with that. So are you hearing me say, you know, I don't think people should become rich? They're going to be rich people, and that's fine. You start up a successful business, you make money, great, good for you. And that's great. You hire people, you come up with new ideas, fantastic, we need you. But I do think we have got to deal with greed. I mean, let me turn that question around, if I might, and say,
Oh, here we go again.
there we go.
Go
We did
ahead.
a extensive poll, and we determined that you, Katie Couric, reflect the views of 340 million Americans. There you are.
Which I don't.
I mean, Elon Musk is on his way to become a trillionaire, and you got 85 million Americans that can't afford health care. Does that make sense at all? So I think at the first level, we have to say, look, you could start a business, you make money, good, great for it. You're going to be rich, great. Do you really need $1 trillion? Do you really need $500 billion when kids in America can't afford to go to college? And by the way, when you, as multi-billionaires, use your political power to fight for tax breaks. I mean, one of these things about Trump's big, beautiful bill that we're dealing with right now in the government shutdown, $1 trillion in tax breaks for Musk and his friends, and massive cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. So first point is, no, I am not anti-business. You want to start a business? Good luck to you. Great, do it. But I am anti-greed and anti-incredible power on the part of the multi-billionaires of this country. And let me just say something else on business. You may agree with me, you may not. Right now, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Larry Ellison, these are some of the richest guys in America. And they have an enormous impact over the media. They own a lot of the media. But on top of that, what they are doing right now as we speak is investing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars into artificial intelligence and robotics. You are aware of that, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, that could be a whole 2-hour conversation we could have, but go on.
All right. All that I want to say is, and I would say that to the average person, do you believe that Mr. Musk and these other guys, and Mr. Musk is pretty honest about it, he says he wants Tesla to build millions of robots. Do you believe that these guys right now, the richest people in America, investing heavily in AI and robotics, are doing that in order to improve the standard of living and life for the working families of this country. What do you think, Katie? Think that's what they're doing?
I would
You think,
say no. I would say no. And in fact, why can't Congress put more guardrails and force these companies to consider the unintended negative consequences of this technology? And why aren't more people talking about that instead of beating China to the punch?
Good. Well, and again, I think you're right. And I'm afraid I have to be a little bit repetitious here and tell you that the reason is if you are Mr. Musk or Mr. Thiel or Mr. Zuckerberg, you don't want those regulations. And you know what? You got a lot of money to spend on your members of Congress to say, hey, don't regulate us. We will do anything we want.
Meanwhile,
So this
you're
gets
very
back.
You're very
I'm
critical,
sorry.
though. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say you're also very critical not only of Republicans, but of the Democratic Party on this
That's fine.
issue, aren't you? On
Yes,
whether
I am.
we're talking about corporate wealth and billionaires, which you think Kamala Harris failed to really reach out and appeal to working class voters, or the failure of the members of Congress and of who are Democrats to do something about this
You're right. I
and
am.
put the guardrails on AI specifically.
Right. I mean, and how you deal with this, again, this is really complicated stuff. And I'm not going to tell you that I have a 3-second solution to it. But this I do know. If we do not, in one way or another, get a handle on this, and this is not Bernie Sanders talking, this is people who really understand AI and robotics a lot better than I do. We are likely talking about millions and millions of American workers losing their jobs. You know, I want to see manufacturing be rebuilt in America. Trump talks about it as well. But you know what? It's not going to mean much to the average American worker if robots are doing the work. I want to see small businesses flourish in America, but if the entry-level jobs in those small and medium-sized businesses are done by AI and not kids who are leaving school, not going to mean much for working people as well. So the fear right now, not only it's a huge economic issue, and you're right, it is not being discussed enough. Now, there are people who differ with me. You know, some people say, well, Bernie, there's always been these technological revolutions, new jobs created, old jobs are lost. No, I don't think so this time. I really don't. I think you're looking at massive changes to the economy. But it's not only, Katie, when you deal with AI, you're talking not just about economics. In America today, I'm sure the viewers know this. We got a lot of serious personal issues, if you like. The level of mental illness and COVID only exacerbated that. The level of loneliness that people are experiencing, the loss of community. There was a time, everybody knew everybody else. And now people feel isolated. Our kids are struggling. I'll never forget, when I get around Vermont schools and I talk to teachers, and they say, Bernie, I spend half my time not teaching English or Spanish or math. I spend half my time kind of mentoring kids who are struggling, with drugs or whatever it may be. So we've got a lot of emotional problems. And what I worry about is kids spending their life, and not just kids, online. Their companions are going to be, some chat box.
Well, finally, we're seeing a movement, though. I mean, I interviewed Jonathan Haidt last week, and we are seeing schools and parents actually fighting back,
Yep.
schools having phone-free days, not allowing cell phones during school hours. That's happening more and more. I think Kathy Hochul signed a law about this here in New York State. So I think we are seeing a backlash, but I could not agree with you more about the impact. And I think the loneliness epidemic is another huge thing that I think has been accelerated by our addiction to technology. So I agree with you 1,000% on all
Right.
these
And
things.
again, it's such, I know, I always end up using the word huge, This is a monumental issue. And nobody has, I don't have the answer to it. Nobody has the answer to it. But it gets back to, I'll tell you something. And what I like about these hour shows, by the way, we can chat More
Yeah.
than a 13-second soundbite, right?
Right.
All right. All right. Are you ready for another question?
Go ahead. Hit me.
It's the la-
Hit me,
the
Bernie.
last it's the last time you're gonna invite me on your show, right?
No, that's not true. I'm thrilled to have you.
Okay. All right. Pew Research Center, PEW. They're very
I know.
reputable.
Yes,
You
yes.
know.
Out of
Okay.
Philadelphia. Yes, very reputable.
A couple of years ago, they did a poll. And here's what the question was, quite in so many words. American people, do you think somebody like you in your situation, middle class, working class, upper income, whatever you may be, somebody like you is better off today than they were 50 years ago? Got it?
Yep.
What was the answer?
No.
Right. According to that poll, 58% of the American people said, no, I think somebody like me was better off 50 years ago. And people understood all of the new technology in healthcare that saves lives, cancer treatments that didn't exist 50 years ago, drugs that, save lives didn't exist, computers, cell phones. People are not unknowledgeable about many of the positive aspects of modern society, right? Cell phones, in my view, in an emergency, it's a good thing. And yet they thought that life 50 years ago, by and large, was better.
In
Isn't
fact,
that rather?
my daughter always says, "Mom, I wish I'd grown up like you in the '70s
Right?
before all this technology existed." So I'm not surprised to hear that answer.
But it's an extraordinary, when you think about it, Katie, what does it say? All of this technology, all of this increase in worker productivity, has it made us healthier or happier? Well, maybe not. And then what we got to do is take a really deep breath and say, all right, is the function, if you're Elon Musk, who I respect, I disagree with him on everything. He's a hardworking guy, he's a brilliant guy. Their goal is efficiency, all right? In 20 years, we're not going to need Katie Couric behind the microphone because you're going to have some artificial intelligence person who knows more than you do, is more articulate than you do. You're not going to need a politician like Bernie Sanders, somebody, is that really where we want to go? Is efficiency the goal in life? Or do we want to create a more human society, whatever that may mean? And one of the things, when we talk about why people are feeling less good about today than they did 50 years ago, is it's economic, but it's also a sense of community where people, I think, back then kind of felt more secure. The world wasn't shifting under their feet. But even in economics, if I can, let me just give you an example. Economics. In 52 years, explosion in worker productivity, technology, the average weekly inflation adjusted for income for working people is lower today than it was 52 years ago. Massive transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. I grew up in New York City in a rent-controlled apartment I try to figure it out, the back of the envelope calculations. You know what my family paid in rent? We paid 18% of our income. We didn't have any money, but we paid 18%. No family in America is paying 18% of their income right now. My brother, as I mentioned, went to college tuition free. So despite all of the technology, we're seeing working families in many respects worse off. And by the way, you poll this thing, people are worried that their kids will be even worse off than they are. How many young people can afford to buy a house today? Our generation, my generation, people could buy homes, working class people could buy homes at a younger age than is currently the case. So all that I'm saying here is we need a real national discussion about where do we want to be? Is efficiency the only thing in life? Or do we want to live happy, productive, meaningful lives? That's a discussion we're not having.
I wanted to ask you about the role of the Democratic Party in all this. Anecdotally, many people are very concerned and worried about the direction of the country and this massive executive overreach that we're seeing in so many different areas of American life. And they're desperately looking for an alternative. Obviously, you and AOC are striking a chord when you go out on this national tour. But many people are very frustrated with the Democratic Party. They use words like feckless and ineffectual and rudderless, and I'm curious if you could share what you think is wrong with the Democratic Party. And I know you've been very critical, and not only what's wrong with it, but how to make it right.
Okay. Again, that's a good 2-hour discussion. So
I know, Sorry.
no, but you're asking, what you said is right. That is, I think the Democratic Party is polling now at the lowest it has polled in
Right.
decades. And I think, look, again, I don't care what your politics may be, and I'm sure we have people like President Trump watching this. Everybody knows the country is in trouble, in deep trouble. And in my view, Trump is making a very bad situation much worse. And I think what people are saying is, give us an understanding. Why are things happening the way they are? And what are you going to do about it? Now, in my view, Donald Trump is a demagogue. And he does what demagogues historically and all over the world today are doing. And what demagogues are people who recognize that there are serious problems facing the country, and Trump does. But then what you do is you blame a powerless minority for all of the problems. So in Germany in the 20s and the 30s, it was the Jews who caused all of the massive economic problems facing the German people. It was gypsies, it was gay people. In America, we've always had, the black community to blame for all of our problems, gays. And today what Trump is focusing on is on undocumented people. You can't afford housing, it's undocumented. Can't afford healthcare, it's the undocumented. Climate change is sweeping the world, it's clearly the undocumented. Your kid's not getting a good education, it's the undocumented. That's what demagogues do. You take a powerless minority and you blame them rather than address the real issues. And to me, the failure of the Democratic Party has been an unwillingness to recognize the real issues. And that, by the way, is what this book is about. The real issues are that we are increasingly living in an oligarchic society where a handful of billionaires who are incredibly greedy, these are not nice guys, want it all, and they control, to a large degree, both the Republican and Democratic Party. And what Democrats and Mamdani in New York is beginning to do, they say, I'm prepared to take on the oligarchs. You want to spend all your money against me? Go for it. I have working class support. I have volunteers all over this country, and we're going to beat you. And to my mind, that is exactly politically what we have got to do. And economically, we need a program that the Democrats also don't have. Again, we discussed a moment ago, whether healthcare is a human right. I have, I think, 15 or 16 Democrats out of 47 in the Democratic caucus on Medicare for all. All I'm asking is to do, in one way or another, what every other major country has done. I got 1/3 of the Democrats. That's not where the American people are. American people are not where the Democratic leadership is on Netanyahu and what is the terrible things that happen in Gaza. They're not where the Democrats are not where they are on education. They're not where they are demanding that the wealthy stop paying their fair share of taxes. So you ask me why the Democratic leadership is struggling, and I think it's largely that they are too much beholden to wealthy corporate interests and not paying attention to the needs of the vast majority of the people who are struggling, working class people.
I don't want to necessarily get into a full-blown discussion of Israel and Gaza, and I understand your point about so many people and innocent civilians dying in Gaza. But I also think it's important, is it not, to recognize that we just marked the two-year anniversary of October 7th, where was the biggest, tragedy, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And Zohran Mamdani put out a statement that failed to condemn Hamas on October 8th, before any military action had taken place from Israel. And I think that's why many Jews in New York City, just getting back as a microcosm of kind of national conversations, feel uncomfortable or even fearful of Zohran Mamdani. So you're Jewish, Bernie, right?
Yep,
I mean,
proudly.
and so I know you mentioned Gaza twice, and I hear what you're saying and understand very well how public opinion has changed. But your failure to even mention October 7th seems odd to me.
No, it's not a failure if you check everything that I've written. Let's
Well,
be
at least during our conversation here.
so let me be clear. All right. Hamas is a terrorist organization, which I hope does not exist in the future. Hamas committed a disgusting war crime, attacked Israel, killed 1,200 innocent men, women, and children, a lot of young people, took hundreds of hostages. Barbaric. The people who orchestrated that disgusting attack are war criminals, period. I have condemned from day one that disgusting attack against Israel, period. And furthermore, Katie, in my view, Israel had, like any other country on earth, if a terrorist attack takes place, you have the right to respond. Israel had the right to respond and to go after Hamas, period. I've said that from day one. But what I have also said is it is one thing to go after Hamas. It is another thing to go to war against the entire Palestinian people and end up killing or injuring 10% of the population. If that same equivalent number applied to America, that would mean 33 million Americans would have been killed or wounded. Okay? Israel did not have the right to destroy virtually every healthcare facility and hospital and school and university and water system and housing. Almost all the housing in Gaza has been destroyed. So, Katie, Hamas is a disgusting terrorist organization. And I want to see the Palestinian people be able to evolve into a democratic society without a terrible group like Hamas. But on the other hand, the leaders of Hamas who engineered that attack are war criminals. Netanyahu, who as of 2 weeks ago was starving to death the children, Palestinian children in Gaza, he is also a war criminal.
Thank you for responding to that. I want to spend the last few minutes, if I could, asking questions that my followers wanted me to ask you, because one of the great things about this kind of journalism, it's very interactive, and you can basically give voice to people who don't have an opportunity to sit with you, Bernie, for an hour and have a conversation. Here's one. What do you think Trump is truly saying to Congress to keep them in line? Is he threatening them with physical violence? Look what happened to the judge whose vacation home was bombed when she made a decision against Trump. He's come to meet with Congress many times. One was just recently. I guess the question is, why are so many Republicans failing to speak out against someone you consider an oligarch?
Well, an oligarch and a demagogue.
Yes.
That is very important. Thank your listener for asking that question. When I talk about what I worry about in America today, maybe I'm just an old-fashioned conservative, I don't know. I kind of believe in democracy. And that is that I was elected to represent the people of Vermont, and 99 other senators were elected to represent the people in their states. But what I see happening in the Republican Party, and it pains me, because let me be very clear, I know many of these Republicans, and I disagree with them. They are often quite conservative men and women. I don't think they're evil people. I don't think they're fascists. I don't think they believe in violence. But what I do believe is they are very much intimidated by Trump and the oligarchs behind him. I will give you just two examples. Many months ago, Democrats and Republicans worked on what was called a continuing resolution to fund the government. And they argued for months on health care and everything else. Finally, they reached a compromise. And I had worked on that bill, a lot of health care provisions in there I worked on. Literally, they were going to vote on it in the House of Representatives. I don't know if you remember this.
Yes.
Elon Musk sent out a tweet. And in his tweet, he lied. He said, this legislation will increase salaries for members of Congress by 40%, total lie, et cetera, et cetera. And literally a day or so before the vote, Republicans said, oh my God, Elon Musk is going to run against us. He's going to fund candidates against us. We can't support it. That agreement fell through, which, by the way, leads us to where we are in the shutdown today, many, many months later. Another example. Conservative Republican guy named Tom Tillis. I don't know if you know Tom from North Carolina.
And I actually heard you talking about Tom Tillis on CNN the other night, but go ahead for those people who might have missed that town hall.
Well,
Tell us what happened Tell us what happened to Tom Tillis.
Tillis is from North Carolina. It's a conservative Republican. Guy reads the legislation, the big, beautiful bill. He says it's going to be a disaster for North Carolina. People are going to lose their health care. Costs are going to, so I can't vote for it. In one day, Trump and the whole right-wing apparatus go after this guy. Billionaires say, we're going to primary you. You're out of here. Guy says, all right, fine, I surrender. I'm not running for re-election. Very few Republicans right now in the House or the Senate have the courage to say, you know what, Donald Trump, you're acting unconstitutionally. You're acting illegally. You're moving this country toward authoritarianism. Your healthcare proposals are a disaster. More than a few understand that. But because of the power of the moneyed interest who will primary them if they stand up to Trump, they're silent. And that concerns me very much.
So they care more about power than their conscience.
They understand that if they stand up and do the right thing, they're going to have a hard time getting reelected. Now, by the way, there are some who have said, you know what, I don't give a damn. I'm going to represent my district, but they are few and far between.
In closing, Bernie, because you've been so generous with your time, the government shutdown is continuing. Democrats are holding firm. Republicans are holding firm. Each side, I think, believes they're winning the PR battle, if you will. How is this going to end? When is it going to end?
I hope it ends tomorrow. I hope it ends as soon as possible because nobody wants to see hardworking federal employees not get a paycheck.
Or get fired.
Or get fired arbitrarily, absolutely, by Trump, which is, by the way, illegal. But legality has not been something that the Trump administration worries much about. But this is what I think, Katie. This is my own view. I'll just tell you, literally yesterday in Vermont, people are beating to receive their notices from the insurance companies. And as just mentioned, I've been talking about it the last couple of days. People are seeing not only a doubling in their premiums, not only a tripling, in some cases a quadrupling of their premiums. In southern Vermont, there are folks who are going to be paying 50% of their middle-class incomes on healthcare. That is not only unconscionable, it's unsustainable. Nobody can do that. And I think all over the country, people are beginning to get notices from their insurance companies about skyrocketing healthcare costs. And I think Republicans will talk about everything. Just the other day, Trump attacked me and went on and on and on. Forgot to mention two words, healthcare. They don't want to talk about healthcare, but the American people are catching on that we cannot see huge increases in our healthcare premiums. We cannot see 15 million people thrown off of healthcare. In my view, and I do study these things a little bit, we have a broken system right now, before Trump. They are taking us over the edge, and we may see our healthcare system literally collapse.
Do you think Republicans are going to budge or Democrats are going to blink?
I think Republicans, when they go home to their districts, they're going to hear from people saying, you cannot vote to double or triple my healthcare premiums. I can't afford it. Don't do it. And I think an agreement will be reached on that basis.
Senator Bernie Sanders, honestly, I could talk to you for 2 more hours. There's so many questions I didn't get to about what's happening with young men in this country. I wanted to talk to you more about Zohran Mamdani, but...
And I have all kinds of questions for you.
I know. I'm sure you had more questions for me, but really, it's great to see you. I really, really appreciate your time. And for those who are interested, your book, it's a small book. You can carry it in your purse, almost in your pocket, not quite, called Fight Oligarchy by Bernie Sanders. And on the back, it says, oligarchy is a system in which a small number of extremely wealthy individuals control the economic, political, and media life of a nation. It is a system in which ordinary people have very little power to determine the future of their country. If you're an American, it is the system in which you're living. That must change. In the wealthiest nation on earth, we must build a political movement that creates a government that represents all Americans, not just a handful of billionaires. That's a bit of what you'll read about in this book in a lot more detail. Again, Bernie Sanders, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Katie. Good to talk to you.